I am so glad to be back with all of you. It's just amazing because over the years, there's many of you that I've seen before. And so it's like going on this journey together that I think is really cool. The last time I did something like this, I was actually working with ninth graders at Harrison High School. And one of the things that we understood is that if we were going to have dropouts, it usually happened in ninth grade. So they needed somebody's shoulders to stand on. So this was during the time that I was doing my bodybuilding competition. And, I came in, I made sure they could see my shoulders because I worked on them so hard. I said, I'm building these shoulders for you. And I would come back each year and they would do this, when they saw me. And so it was really neat because the goal was to follow them from ninth grade to 12th grade and then speak at their 12th grade graduation. So just really being able to be connected, I think, is really important. I know that that's been important for me. And just like Deborah had said, a very dear friend. But what many people don't know is that Deborah was someone that I saw and I said, I want to do what she does. I met her when she was doing training for public speaking. And I just was in awe. And so I always tried to follow what she did, which was amazing. And she still is amazing. And so to date, I'm getting ready to send out all my information. I'm opening up my own school. It's the Regina Speaking Academy. So that'll start in November. Yeah. So I'm really excited. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn this speaker on and... Okay, perfect. We're talking about, really becoming your child's superhero. And you go, well, what is that all about? I mean, how do we become our child's superhero? When we are raising our children, it's really exciting at the beginning. Our children are babies and we have all these hopes and dreams for them. And then they get a little bit older and they're curious and we're teaching them everything. So I was thinking about what was it that I was teaching my son? What things did I teach him? Well, I had to teach him how to suck through a straw. I mean, something as simple as that. I had to help him to blow a bubble and to ride his bike, right? And then it became really serious that I started to teach him other things like how to grieve and how to, be okay when things didn't seem to be okay. And, it just continued on. And my son's everything. The sun rose and set on me. And I loved it. And we all can relate to that. And then something changes. Our children, all of a sudden, like just overnight, it just click. And it's like, where is my child? Where did they go? That we're not connected. Nothing that I say is what they want to hear. They seem like I'm the bad person. And how does that happen? Now, many of you over the years have heard me talk about my son, Charles, and that's my signature. So Lady Di, she was known for the pearls that she would wear, and others are known for their pill box. And so it's usually something that you wear, but my signature is always mentioning my son in every speech. And so when I talk about my son, it's like this fantasy story, like he was the best thing ever and we got along perfectly from beginning to end. But that actually was not the case. That wasn't always the way that it was. And it was hard. As a matter of fact, I remember one time him saying to me, I said to him, I said, I'm proud of you. I saw your report card and he had gotten all A's and he had got one B. And I looked at him and I said, man, it wouldn't take anything, much of anything, for you to change that B into an A. And he was so angry with me because he was like, you're not even grateful for what I did get. You're so focused on this B. And that's not really what I was trying to say. And so then he just started getting a little flippant. And at first I felt bad, but then after a while I was like, oh, you forgot I was your mama, didn't you? What? Okay, I got you, and he just kept on. So I said, okay, let me tell you something. When he finally got to a point where he says, I don't need you. What? You say you don't need me? What? Now I got my eyes all stretched and my hands are all going, doing all the finger snapping, all the stuff I tell people not to do. And we were in the car. So I was like, I'm going to swerve this car. I'm going to pull it over in just a minute. We're going to have a good time here. But I looked at him and I says, let me show you what it is not to need me. It was at that point that I just did what the law told me I had to do, right? I got everything out of his room. He had one pair of shoes, right? He had enough change of clothes to last him a week, which meant he had to wash his clothes. He had oatmeal and ramen noodles, and that was it. And when he looked at it, and this went on for a while, at first he was like, okay. I was like, I think I can outlast you, but come on with it. So he, kept going, and, he had a little phone. Oh, that had to go too. I remember having to use quarters and dimes and everything else. So finally, he said, this is it? You're not going to do anything else? I said, absolutely not. And then finally, he came to me and he says, I need my mom. You do? You do? Yes. And that's when he realized the importance of me. But as he got older, it wasn't that we had that kind of conflict, but what we did have is that he was trying to grow up. He was trying to find himself. And I remember when he was at the Air Force Academy and he was trying to get into the teacher prep program, and he said he had to speak and, introduce and do something. He did it, and then later he told me what he talked about. And he talked about public speaking. And it was like, and you didn't ask what? I mean, me? No. Then he got a tattoo right here that you could get 25% of any area you can get a tattoo in the Air Force Academy. And he got one with his dad's name on it. I go, what? What? So it's those little things, and then you start to feel hurt. And you start to wonder, where did I go? How do I become a superhero again? What is it that it's going to take? Because I miss my baby boy. I talk about you all the time. Everybody who knows me knows you. And you keep leaving me out. But it's been really cool lately. I've become a superhero again. And everything that I've been doing, I have put in this PowerPoint, so I'm going to help you out. But it was really neat when he called me and he said, Mom, I want you to be the first to know that I am now a candidate to be major. I was like, what? And then he calls me another time, Mom, I just became a candidate for my PhD, and I need your advice because I'm writing and I'm trying to figure out how should I word this? I need your expertise. And I was like puffing up and I ripped open my chest. That S was coming out, and it became real. So I just wanted to put it in context about what we're talking about tonight. And I hope in just that little bit of an example, it has provided you enough for you to reflect on where are you with your child? What does it look like? And if you have it where, hey, I don't have them problems, everything is great, just wait. Just wait. Because it will come. It will come. So let's start here. What I would like for you to do as I'm getting ready to play a video. And what I want you to do in this video, and I did put together a package for you. But anyway, what I want you to do is I just want you to listen to it. And I want you to reflect. And if you have something to write with, if you don't, it's okay. But you can put it to memory. But I just want you to write down any words or phrases that relates to you as you try to be that superhero.
What's the S stand for?
It's not an S. On my world, it means hope.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Jarvis, sometimes you gotta run before you can walk.
So no matter how bad things get, there's something good out there, just over the horizon.
Understand, this is all I have. I'm nothing without this suit.
If you're nothing without this suit, then you shouldn't have it, okay?
All right. Shouldn't the people know the hero who saved them? A hero can be anyone, even a man doing something as simple and reassuring as putting a coat around a young boy's shoulders to let him know the world and
If you're using half your concentration to look normal, then you're only half paying attention to whatever else you do. Just pointing out something that could save your life. You want society to accept you, but you can't even accept yourself.
You could die. At least tell me your name.
it's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me.
Then they glimpse the darkness that lives within their light, and learn that inside every one of them, there will always be both. A choice each must make for themselves, something no hero will ever defeat. And now I know that only love can truly save the world.
You still believe?
Just because someone stumbles, loses their way, it doesn't mean they're lost forever. Sometimes we all need a little help. But if you make yourself more than just a man, if you devote yourself to an ideal, and if they can't stop you, then you become something else entirely. Which is? Legend, Mr. Wayne. I wanted to save Gotham. I failed. Why do we force it? So that we can learn to pick ourselves up.
Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right, even if the whole world is telling you to move, it is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say no. You move.
You know, in those quotes, there wasn't anyone that was scolding, no one who is threatening, no one who is shoving anything down the listener's throat, because we often do that with our own children. Instead, they spoke with heart. They spoke with intention. They spoke with care, and you could see that what they were saying, they were speaking from their own experience as well. I don't know what you heard in there, but one of the things that resonated with me, and I could just imagine me saying it to my son, and I know that I have in other words, is when they said, you must sometimes run before you walk. And that has been always my motto. That's always been me. And so you may have heard something in there that you could actually talk to your children about, to say that little piece. But when you do, you have to bring everything about you into it. You have to make them feel what it is that you're saying. And when you do that, there's a whole different tone of voice. There is this eye contact that you're not looking at them, you're looking into their soul. You're giving them every piece of you when you speak it. But here's the thing. They may not hear it the first time. And a saying that I've heard for many years, and it wasn't until years later when it made a lot of sense, and that is, when the student shows up, the teacher will appear. So they may not be ready to be that student yet, but they heard you. And when they do, it's going to hit them like a ton of bricks. Be ready. They'll be back. But they're not going to come back if they haven't seen it in you. There seems to be this disconnect in what is actually happening. Let's try to understand why there's even this disconnect in the first place. Let's talk about Generation Y, the millennials. Many of us in this room are within that range. I'm not, but it's okay. It gets even further apart. But what is happening is the children that I'm talking about right now, their parents, most of them are in this Generation Y or millennials. And even if not, because some of the children are raised by their grandparents. And so they have to think even further. So if you can compare just these two, it'll help you to understand where the disconnects can actually take place between your generation, whatever generation that is, and their generation. So let's just look at it from here. Let's look at what this is. First of all, Gen Y or millennials, they call them both. So this is an interchangeable name. This was technology, was just the way of life. Just the way of life. Like it's constant. It's just the way it is. And it's really crazy because one person I don't talk about too often is my boyfriend. We've been together 15 years and he's from this generation. And I'm a baby boomer. And believe me, I'm like, okay, so get off that technology right now. Most ethnically and racially diverse of all generations. It's more diverse in this generation than any others, which is phenomenal. It's amazing. I remember when my son's girlfriend wanted to have tea with me. I was like, this must be really serious. And when she came, she was so nervous, but I was really excited. But because she was nervous, I was going to feed into it. Yeah, may I help you? Actually, yeah. Now, my son is in an interracial marriage. And she said, Charles said that before I talk to you, I better do my research. I said, that's right. And I'm thinking, no, I didn't. I don't know anything. She says, I found out that interracial marriages stay together longer than same-race marriages. And I perked up. I was like, really? I didn't even know that. But I bring that up because, one, she did the research, but two, this is the kind of conversations that are taking place that started to become natural for Gen Y and millennials. It's just the way that it is. And I think part of that is because they play like those Xbox and PlayStations. And if you think about it, they're fighting and playing on their team with creatures and things that are purple, and they're jumping out and they're balls or whatever. They don't care what you look like. Can you play? And can you help me to win? And so it's just amazing how it became more inclusive. It's the most inclusive generation. They lived through the Great Recession, the explosion of the internet and social media, and the horrendous terrorist attack of 9/11. And this is their world that they've lived in. So I want you to stop and think about this. This is, most of you, this is your world. And so if you're living through all of this, first of all, you're being connected in ways that none of us before then had ever. You know, this is the time that we actually saw a war, full war on television. It was Desert Storm. I was in Desert Storm. And this was like where you almost feel like you're there. So it really changed what the world looked like. The world suddenly became smaller because a push of a button and you could be there. So it was very, very different than my generation, something that I couldn't understand. And then you have to think that they now are feeling like this is the first time that we've been attacked on our soil. So how safe do we feel? So now safety becomes an issue for you. And so we become overly protective for our children who say, would you please get off of me? And we're looking at them like, you don't seem to understand. I'm trying to protect you. And here you are telling me to move back. And that's because their world is different. Never known our country not to be at war. We've been at war that entire time, still at war. There hasn't been peace. Like, what does that even look like? So think about try to be cautious, because when you start thinking about during back, like my parents and my grandparents, I couldn't understand. I just thought that they were hoarders. Like, why are you picking up that nail on the ground and putting it in a jar and putting it in the garage? We don't need another one. Why do you have runners and doilies and plastic all over everything? Because it made no sense. But for them, they had to preserve everything. They had to hold on to everything because they know what it's like for it to be gone. But for me, the child, it was ridiculous. So the things that you're talking about becomes ridiculous. But we can start to see how. They have a high expectations. You have high expectations. I expect you to treat me this way. I expect this to be done. I expect you to do well. We have these expectations, and so much so that we expect them to do better than we did. It's almost going back to do what I say, not what I do. And our children today are like, you can't tell me anything if you didn't do it. Really important. Likely to change jobs and roles to suit their needs. Blows my mind. Blows my mind. Because if you came out with a resume that didn't show longevity, then people were wondering, well, what have you been doing? You're not loyal. But we then look, and your generation is like, I'm not staying here. Please, I'm out. Again, let's go back to my boyfriend. From January to now, he's had, I think, 4 or 5 jobs. I was like, what is wrong with you? He said, well, they're paying me more. Okay. But he's making that bread. I was like, well, if it works for you, just give me some of that money. I'm good. I guess it'll work, And not afraid to seek employment elsewhere if their ambitions is not met. That is amazing. So that's where they are and where you are. This is where you are, majority of you. This is you. And it's mind-blowing to me. Anybody here like a baby boomer or back further, tell me it's not crazy. You know it's crazy. I know. And these were our kids. They were our kids. But again, that was ages 28 to 43. But let's go ahead into your children. So I want you to remember this. Remember this, and it's in your packet. And it goes into even more detail. So you have it there, because what I'd like for you to do is take this packet with you and start highlighting the things that you are compared to what your children are, and start to see the disconnect, because this is where we learn to connect. So let's look at this. We're now looking at Gen Z. So I wanted to know, well, where did they get Z from Gen Z, and all it says is, well, it followed Y. I was like, oh, okay. But anyway, this is ages 13 to 33. So think about a 13-year-old. How many of you have 13, 14-year-olds? Yeah, you already know. How many of you have children that are getting ready to go into college or getting ready to graduate? Yeah. And so it's like, this is that distancing. This is where it's at. So let's look and see what has happened. Grew up in the hyper-connected world with cell phones and smart tablets. Okay, so y'all had the internet, but our kids now have these smartphones and tablets. So guess what? They have information on their hip, to their ear, in the palm of their hand in a split second, and will prove you wrong by just saying, well, hold on, let me Google that. It's like, what? So already we have a problem, right? More fiscally conservative approach to life. So they are conservative. As a matter of fact, I noticed, I wonder if any of you ever heard this. You go to a restaurant or Starbucks or something, and you hear them to say, hi, love. Anybody been called love? Like, hi, love. And I was like, I don't know what to think of that. Like, is that a nice thing, or are you, what? What's going on? But maybe they're trying to bring love back. It's kind of like the flower children from back when. But they're much more conservative in a different way, because where you might be conservative because of the wars, and so you're trying to be protective, they're conservative in a different way because they're living longer in their parents' home. Like, you don't have any ambition to leave, or they don't want to drive. I couldn't wait. I don't care if I was running over everything, The first car I learned how to drive in was a stick shift on South Academy and Hancock. And I shifted that thing and went right into the dirt and couldn't get out. And it was a hot mess. But I did it because I just wanted to get out there. I was ready to go. And now it's like, I'll take my time. What? So this is where they're very different. And they are tech savvy. Spend a lot of time on social media identifying with causes and supporting organizations that embrace them. This is giving you some hints, and I'm going to tell you why in just a second. And lastly, interested in racial, gender, and income equity, as well as environmental issues. So if that's the case, you can already see where there's a difference from the way you were. So how do we get their interest back? They're not thinking about these things when they are 8, not as much as they are when they're 13, 15, 20. So what do we talk about with them? How do we embrace them? How do we communicate with them? So as a professor, so I just retired, I call it rewirement, from Pikes Peak State College in January. And for 21 years, I had students. And one of the rules, and I would always say this, I said, what's the rule about having cell phones in the classroom? Turn them off, put them away. But I knew that was going to be a disconnect, because the number one complaint from students when they would come to me as the department head was about the cell phone thing or the computer, laptop, or tablet. It was always this problem. And in my head, I'm like, well, why isn't our teachers getting this? So the first thing I would tell my students, I said, pull out your cell phone. And they're like, okay. I said, now make it ring. And they're like, because you might know who's calling me. I said, no, pull them out. And they would pull them out. Then I would ring my phone. I said, when you hear this ring, that's my son calling. And I'm going to answer it no matter what, period. This ring is my mother. She calls, I'm getting it. So what ring do you have? So I was already including them, already. Then I would ask them questions. I said, pull out your phone, pull and look this up. If you don't have a phone with you or you don't have internet or whatever, then you sit next to somebody who does. And then I would have the fastest fingers in the flying west. Who could get this information the fastest? And it was cool. They loved it. They were like, when are we going to do that again? I said, well, what did you learn? And they would run it down like this because they were having fun learning. So instead of us trying to tell them what they can't do because we're trying to make them live the generation that we lived in, we have to meet them where they are, what that looks like. We have to talk to them about, well, what do you want to do with your life right now? What does that look like? And then they start to hear you, because you can hear a person when they're talking your language, much easier to listen to. So we need to invite that in. We need to have an opportunity to talk to them and allow them to speak their truths, even if it's crazy for us. What anime are you watching today? Yeah, I want to know that. Now, I don't understand anything about this technology thing, but can you look this up for me? Sure. As a matter of fact, I want to find a way to organize my life. Can you help me with that? There's an app. Click. There you go. Thank you. So that's the conversations that we had. So when I was raising Charles, then I started looking at the things that he was interested in. So he wanted to be an astronaut. So I gave him a theme party, and when it was all about being an astronaut. So he loved that. It was fantastic. And then this show, anybody remember a show called Pimp My Ride? Oh, yeah. Well, I went to the Goodwill, and I found 6 bikes. And then I went to the store, dollar store and everything, and I collected stickers and horns and tassels and everything that you could think of to go on bikes. And the name of his party was Pimp My Bike. And we had 6 different teams, and they put them all together, and they thought I was the coolest mom. Now, mind you, my son got to go to a private school in the Broadmoor, the Colorado Springs school, but he got that through the Oprah Winfrey Show. So I was the one that had a car that I had to pop the clutch and push it, to get it going and run it, and he's like this. And the other parents, lots of them were driving Mercedes and Audis and everything else, so he's like, oh my gosh. So instead of them moving away from Charles, they would line up to see when can they come to his birthday party, because I was doing everything that relates to them. So these are just secret ways of doing that. But right now we're parents, and that's why we're here. We're parents. But I want to help you to figure out how to become a superhero parent, like, dun, 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 dun. Yeah. It starts out with really understanding what is a superhero. Now, how many of you can name a superhero, any superhero? Thor? What? Spider-Man? Who? Iron Man? Wonder Woman? Black Panther? Wakanda Forever. I thought there was really a Wakanda. I'm just saying, I just didn't know. But so think about it. Like, what do they all have in common? Like, what is it about all these superheroes that has something in common? So I looked it up. Actually, I called my boyfriend and said, tell me, and then I looked it up. And I found out that these superheroes have 6 characteristics in common. 6 characteristics. And as I'm going through them, you're going to see in your packet the 6 characteristics, and I want you to just start thinking, what is yours? And I'm going to explain them as we go along. So the first one is that they have extraordinary powers and ability. They have extraordinary powers and ability. And I just want you to start thinking about what is your extraordinary powers and ability. And I'll go into it further in a few minutes. They have a strong moral code. They got a sidekick or helper who knows their secrets. They have a distinct costume. They have a secret identity. And they have an arch enemy. Yep. And we probably could look at all of these and think about ourselves and people outside of our family, our immediate family, like siblings, cousins, friends, co-workers. We can think about it that way. But let's bring it back to you and your children. So let's talk about that distinct costume. The distinct costume as a parent is that you need to remember that you are a parent. There are distinct, important things that you as a parent are responsible for. So never forget that. So I was watching some people, like, there was this one singer, I won't name who the singer is, but she's out there with her daughter with the same kind of clothes as if she was her daughter's age, doing things that they really shouldn't be doing. Just forgetting you are the parent. There are other times where we talk to our children like they're our best friend, or like we are the child. But I told you, you have to come here. What? You're the parent. Remember that there is an age gap between you and your child. I don't care how young you were when you had your child. You had to be old enough to have a child. So there is an age gap between you. So we have to remember that to understand that what they think, how they think, and what they're doing is different from you. So you have to figure out how to have the meeting of the minds. And sometimes understand that they're not capable of reaching that yet. So you have to do it. Instead of saying, well, that's what they did. They don't know. They are still the child. So we have to remember that. We also have to step back and let them grow. We have to do that. It's hard to watch our child or our children do that. So for instance, when Charles finished at the Air Force Academy, he didn't get married yet, but him and his girlfriend were going to drive from Colorado Springs to North Carolina, no, even further, to Boston. I was like, oh, Lord Jesus, have mercy. Car was packed. I mean, she had a plant on her lap, and I'm thinking, how are you going to go from here all the way there with a plant on your lap? And you know what I wanted to do. Let me handle it. I'm going to get something to take it there. I'm going to get y'all on the plane. We'll ship your car. I wanted to do that so bad. But I had to let him grow. And it was one of the hardest things I had to do outside of the first time he drove by himself in a car. And he went across from where we lived, which was right there off of like Hancock and Academy, over to King Supers, right across. And he was just driving there, and I was like, oh Lord, I was on both knees all the way. And I waited until he got back, and as soon as he drove up, I was like, I knew you could do it. When Charles was 13, he wanted to go to the mall with his friends. Now, I wasn't going to let my child be in no mall at 13 with other 13-year-olds by himself. I said, now how am I gonna do this? I said, this is what I'm gonna do. We are gonna go to the mall. You and your friends get to walk ahead. And I'll be several steps behind. So they got to be cool and everything. And every once in a while, he'd look back and I would be like, I don't see nothing, but that walk is not it. I was like, let me show you how it's done, boy. But I couldn't do that. I was just trying to let him do his thing. When he was 14, Charles decided that him and his best friends, Sporty and James, were going to be the coolest group of kids, and they were going to start their own rap group. So what they bought at the mall and came back with, I wouldn't allow my worst enemy to wear. It was bagging and pulling, and the hats was twisted, and he was trying to do his thing, and they were, yeah, this and the other, and they got the fake gold things to shove up in there. I said, that's not my child. Everybody knows me. So I started taking pictures. I started taking pictures of him. And then once everybody left, I showed him the picture. I said, is this you? I said, is this what you're trying to do? I said, tell me, what are you trying to do? And he says, I'm trying to be cool. I said, well, let me ask you something. Are you trying to be 50 Cent cool or Usher cool? Well, I just need to understand which one. And he said, I'm trying to be Usher cool because the girls like Usher. I said, well, let me show you how it's done, son. Get your coat on, we going to the mall. So we did, and they had this stand with the big gold rope chains and all this stuff. He's like, yeah, that's it. I said, Usher ain't gonna wear that. Let me show you what he would wear. So I took him inside of Claire's. I mean, I couldn't take him to Kay's. I couldn't afford that. But I did take him over to Claire's and got him a really nice chain that was more expensive than anything I spent. And he was like, oh, I said, now let me tell you something. You're going to see your friends wearing that plastic over there. And it might be big, but it's big plastic. I said, but you are going to wear a real chain. So I started teaching him quality without putting him down. Do you see? So it's those types of things that's important. It's imperative that you don't just tell them no. You got to help them to discover no. Let them find it on their own through the way you talk and help them to do that. Guess who your arch enemy is? Your child. When they hate you, they are telling you something, right? When your child is not liking you, when your child is, leave me alone, I'll call you later. I remember speaking to one of the parents here, and their child had gone off to college. And they said, we used to be so close, but they won't talk to me, they won't call, they don't want my help, and it's killing me. And she was in tears. And I said, listen closer. Listen. Your child is telling you something. Now, listening doesn't necessarily mean that you ask a question and they respond, because they don't always do that. But what they will do is they'll give you little hints. The music that they're playing, the conversations that they're having, the clothes that they're wearing. What is it that they're trying to tell you? One thing I know they're telling you is, I'm trying to find me. I'm trying to find me as an individual.
Dad, Emma, Bertha, can you please come to the front, Dad? Emma, Bertha.
So we must learn to listen deeply. And the way that we listen deeply is just to breathe. Breathe. And it works, because how many of you have ever watched television or gone to the movies? Okay. So there's a frame. And when we get into the movie theater, we go, wow, look how big the screen is. When we're watching TV, we can see the frame. But once we start watching the movie or the show, we're just breathing. And then after a while, we just become part of the show. And we don't see the frame around it anymore. And that's because we're just breathing. We might be eating something, but we're really just breathing. So sometimes we just have to breathe to listen deeply. Ooh, extraordinary powers and abilities. Think about your extraordinary powers and abilities. You have them. You wouldn't be here today. Every one of us have gone through something. Every single one of us. And some of the things that we've gone through, our children have no idea. They just know that it's okay over here. And even if they've gone through it with you, they still don't know to the level and the depth in which you have. But you have clawed your way to be here today. So there's some strengths that you have. There is. There are some abilities that you have that you'll be able to whip out and toss to your child one day. They will look at you like, wow, I didn't even know you could do that you were capable of, that you were able, or they're going to identify it for you. Like when my son said, Mom, I have to get your advice because I know that you can do it well. And I'm like, I can? Go ahead, tell me again. Right? Sometimes you have to be cunning. So, when I told you that I let my son discover no, he thought he was the one making the decision. I remember him coming home and saying he wanted his ear pierced. I was like, not on my watch. At least that's what I thought, right? And so I said to him, I said, oh, really? I said, you're getting ready to go into high school. I said, so, and you want your ear pierced. I said, what is, back then when you had your ear pierced, what was like the reputation? What is it that people would think of you? Well, they would think that you're a troublemaker or you're doing this or you're doing that because that's the way it was then. And I said, okay. I said, is that the reputation you want? And he says, no. He said, but they all know me. I said, yes, they know you in middle school, but they haven't met you in high school yet. So if they get the wrong impression, then what? So I was asking more questions than I was giving them answers. So this is just another thing to help them. And then speed. You got to be quick. You got to think on your feet. You got to move in there. When you see that opening, take advantage of it right then. That's an opportunity for you that you can do. So I'm constantly trying to move fast. Strong moral code. You have to have one. One of my morals and code is that I wake up consciously happy every day and be kind to everyone. Those are my 2 rules. That's what I do. But raising my child, I always had consistency and consequences. If you do A, B is going to happen, no matter what, good, bad, or indifferent. And the parents, we're bad at that. We will say, well, you can't go unless you do this, and then when they do it, we still don't make it happen. Every single time, my son could set his watch on it. Be true to your word. Say what you mean and mean what you say. So these are important. Remember this, and this is something you could say to your children. Instead of telling them what to do, here's just a simple phrase, especially if they're going to choose something you don't think that they should. If you choose, then you've chosen. If you choose, then you've chosen. And explain to them what it is that they will be choosing. But give them examples of a couple different ways so that they can choose and then step back and let them make that choice. But you've got to make sure that what it is, it will happen. I like this one. Having a sidekick. The sidekick, you have to be their sidekick. You can't be the one that's in front. You can't be the one that's making decisions. You're their sidekick. Robin was Batman's sidekick, but you've never seen him stand in front, well, I don't think so, of Batman. Because he's the sidekick. Because now your child has to lead their way just as you led your own. So now I'm going towards the end of this stuff, right? I want you to think about movies. And in movies, they have this triangle. This is how they build movies and shows. And that is, it's called the Cartman drama triangle. And a lot of people who make films use this. So the Cartman drama triangle says that there's always going to be a villain. There's always going to be a victim. And there's always going to be a savior. There's always going to be that. So as a parent, what are you? What role do you play? And how can we change that to a place of really being that sidekick? What does that really look like? Well, first of all, you don't want to jump into those three places. And the way that you stop jumping in is to ask more questions. Ask questions. But let's look at it. So how do we express and experience caring? Well, there is that persecutor, right? There is the rescuer. And then there is, I spelled it wrong, sorry. And then there's the victim. So let's look at it. The persecutor. So I want you to just think about this. And actually, in your packet, I have all of these in here. So you'll be able to see all the characteristics. But what I want you to do is underline the ones that you say, yeah, that's me. So the persecutor. Critical judgment. So you're critical and you're judging your child, what they wear, what they listen to, what they decide, who their friends are. Do you see yourself as that? Argumentative. Arguing with your child more than you are agreeing with them. Lashes out. Blamer. Makes victims feel helpless. Like, no, you need me. You need me. Driven by anger or resentment. That's a persecutor. And sometimes your children are the persecutor, right? Oh, it's behind. Uses guilt to control. Rigid in their thinking. No, you can't watch television. No, you have to be in here. No, you can't go here. No, 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 no. Are we that? When my son was 16 or 17, it was his last year in high school. And once I knew he was going to be accepted to the Air Force Academy, I got him an apartment. And it was a 6-month contract, and it's for people who travel all the time. And so it's all, like all the furniture's in there, the internet, everything. And it was cheap at the time. So I just put the full amount for 6 months into a bank. And then I let him go there Friday after school until Sunday, and then he had to come home only if he did his homework for the week. But that was my way of starting to let go. But as other parents heard it, they were like, absolutely not. Why is he doing this? I would never let my child. Rigid, rigid, rigid. And it really helped him. Bossy. Are you bossy? Dominating or oppressive. Me first attitude. It's important to be right. Do you always have to be right, or could you tell your children you're wrong? That, hey, mom is wrong, dad's wrong, or I'm wrong, or grandparent, or whatever. The rescuer. So usually this happens when there's two parents. Or even not that, the guardian, whoever you are, and you're trying to be the rescuer for your child, like at school, right? This is what happens. Over helpful. I'll help you. You don't have to do it. Go to sleep. I'll wash your dishes. I'll do your homework. Enabler and can be a martyr. Feels responsible for your child, right? Over responsible. fixes other people's problems, fixes your child's problems, makes sacrifices and discounts personal needs. Isn't that something? And we do it. But is this really helping them, right? Sometimes it is. Sees self as a rescuer, sees others as helpless, feels guilty or with problems when problems can't be solved, keeps the victim dependent. That's terrible, because if you do that, when they get ready to go off to college, they're still very dependent on you. Or they break free from that, and then you're like, what happened? I thought you needed me. My brother did that with his daughter, and when she got a full ride scholarship for basketball, he didn't want her to leave the state. Today, we have a challenge with her on drugs. 2 children later, and no fathers. Could have been something totally different. So we really need to think about that. Rescuing creates a sense of being capable. If I rescue you, then you'll be okay. And believe me, I wanted to rescue my child for everything. When he called me and told me they were yelling at him on the bus at the Air Force Academy, I wanted to go up there like, who you talking about? That's my baby right there, but I couldn't do that. I know, it was just an automatic thing. So the persecutor, this should say, I'm sorry, this one here shouldn't say persecutor, it should say victim. So if you feel like the victim, my child, they don't care, feels oppressed, feels helpless and ashamed. And I hear parents sometimes do that when they say, my kids are so bad, they just won't listen. And they're like 3 or 5. Beat that heart. No, I didn't. Did I say anything? Feel powerless and incapable. Like, I just can't. I don't really know what to do. And let me tell you something. There are people like that. And I'm not saying that it's the bad thing. What I am saying is that we need to be able to help. We need to figure out, well, if I can't do it, I need to get somebody who can mentor me on how to do this. Because I'm not able to do this. Because here's the thing. Whatever you do with your child, whatever they get away with, it gets bigger as they get older. And here it is. Do you want to discipline them, or do you want the law to discipline them? The big difference. In my family, my mother and father, they were definitely disciplinarians with everything. And till they had my baby sister. And she got away with everything. I said, what? Go clean her room. What? If I didn't clean my room, I would get a beating. Back then, we really would get beaten. Like, we don't do. Ask me what my sister's doing today. Nothing. We got to stop and think about that. Think about not now, but the future. A victim is somebody who's dependent and seeks a rescuer. They're going to seek a rescuer. And that could be your child, or it could be you. You wait till your so-and-so gets home. Like, why don't you do it, right? Because we're trying to get that rescuer. Trouble solving problems for themselves. Has a poor me or poor us attitude. Self-pity. Avoids responsibility. Views self as lesser than others. And you're not. You're a parent. That's amazing. I think it's the most difficult job. Blames others for their deficit situation. But how do we turn this around? How do we turn these places around? How do we move it from being one that's a persecutor into a challenger? instead of a rescuer into a coach, and into from a victim to a thriver. So one of the first things is that when you become a challenger, you have to allow your child to write their own story. And that's sometimes hard because we want to write their story. But here it is. When they write their story, they have to make sure they're in it. Charles can't write his story and talk about me. He's got to talk about him. So we were in Arizona last year, him and I. And it was the first time him and I got on stage and spoke together. It was a great honor. And I've always told our story, you know, how we graduated, how we went to school, all this stuff. And I was like, I can't wait to hear his version of the story. And boy, did he say some things. I was like, what? That ain't how it happened, you know. But check out what he said. And this is kind of because it was just recorded by somebody from afar. So I hope we can hear it.
I had to do was this for 2 moments, 3 marks, 4 moments, so that's up. And we said, and I trying to ask about I thought I worked this far if you do what you asked for that. That's why so I had to write my own story there. And it was a little bit changed, but it allowed me to think of what I'm going to do in the future. And that for me was to go and be an instructor out there.
So what my son said was when he told me what he wanted to do, I said, what are you talking about? That's not the plan. You're supposed to be an astronaut, and that's what you're going to do. And my son, at the tender age of 17, looked at me and said, no, that's not what I'm going to do. Now, you know, I wanted to say, wow, what? I didn't. I looked at him and I said, really? He says, no. I want to be a teacher at the Air Force Academy. And I'm thinking, what? I was ready to go to the moon. I already was trying to figure out what phone that I need to call him from here to, the moon. And I just told him, I said, well, good luck. And unfortunately, see, everything I'm telling you now is not how I was. And so I had to learn some of this. But I just told him, I said, okay, if that's what you're going to do, go ahead. So at that moment, he didn't feel like he really had my support. That's why he said, I had to figure it out and I had to write my own story. And I'm looking now, he's already taught at the Air Force Academy for 2 years. And now he's top of his class getting his PhD. He'll be doctor next year and coming back and teach. And guess what I do? My son's a teacher at the Air Force Academy. He's like, you know that's not what you felt at the beginning. But I wish that instead of me being a persecutor around that, I had have been a challenger. That I would have challenged him to say, and how are you going to get there, right? So a challenger is someone that would communicate assertively, not aggressively, like I did. They would express thoughts and feelings and ideas with room for the other perspective, my son's perspective, right? Would ask questions instead of ordering or blaming. Didn't know that then. Be accountable for the problem and the solution. If I say it and it doesn't work, I need to be accountable for that. Makes expectations clear. So my son had gotten like 9 scholarships, accepted to like 9 different schools. And so Air Force Academy was always in my mind because that's what we talked about. I mean, I gave him birthday parties, Air Force Academy was. And he said, I got accepted to some school in California for interior design. He said, so that's where I really want to go. I was trying to figure out what am I going to do, So what I said, and this was clear. So by then his father had passed away, but he had left him money, right, that he could use for school or whatever. And I said, you go to the Air Force Academy, that's a $415,000 scholarship. you go to California, you pay, and you'll use that money. I'm not paying. He was like, I'm going to Air Force Academy. So I was very clear with my expectations, right? Recognize your opportunities. My opportunity at that time was to embrace him. My opportunity was to support him. My opportunity was to now go on this journey with him, and I didn't at the beginning. And so those were moments that I can never get back. Never. Do not use your power or position to control. Yeah, well, I am the parent. I'm going to flex my parent muscles. And then be willing to collaborate. Collaboration is not like compromise. Compromise is a win-lose situation where somebody's got to give up something and somebody else gets to keep theirs. Or it's a lose-lose where we both give up a little bit of each. But collaboration takes more work, but this is where everybody wins. Everybody wins. That coach, express your confidence in your child. I believe in you. As soon as somebody said that, I soared. I soared. You know, I wanted to teach public speaking. I wanted to do what Deborah did. And she was just like, oh, you know, like I didn't know her. She didn't really know me. I was like, oh my gosh, you know. And I says, I would love to. I said, but I can't do that. And she says, oh, I believe you can. And I was like, well, if she says I can, she must see something in me. And that's what I do. Lets others do for themselves, listens without taking on others' problems, sets boundaries. Oh, you got to set boundaries. Offers compassion over solution. Let them come up with their solution. Support instead of rescuing. That's not easy to do because it's easy to just rescue. Ask more questions. I can't emphasize that enough. And then lets others think for themselves. So the last one is instead of being the victim, then you're a thriver. And that's how we were able to move forward in our lives. States what you want or need from your child, and let your child state what they want or need. Takes action to move forward. If you are a dreamer, guess what? You're asleep. Wake up. Wake up. Put it into action. Recognize and owns your strength. Sometimes we're ashamed. We don't even want to show it. You know, like, I'll be humble, but you know, what is that? How does that help anybody if you dim your light? Let it shine, others can see. Appreciates your uniqueness. Let your child appreciate their uniqueness too, because we are unique. Help them to see what their uniqueness was. Mine is this raspy voice, and I remember I used to be so embarrassed and the kids would pick on me. I used to go to Guyberson, Panorama, and Harrison, and they picked on me. I still know my bully today. It ended up being a police officer. And they used to pick on me about my voice. And my mother said to me one day, she said, let me tell you something, baby. You got $1 million voice. You just watch and see. I know. I will never forget that. Understands and knows how to appropriately code switch. You gotta teach your child, and you gotta do it too. There's one way you speak in private, another one when you speak in public. There's another one when you are talking to your child when your child was born, and then you code switch when they get about 6, and then you gotta code switch again when they're 13. And then by the time they graduate, you have to switch again. And meaning, how do I talk to you? Bally's used to be over here. How many of you remember Bally's? Yeah. When my son turned 13, I looked at him and I said, you're no longer at the Y. You're at Bally's. Do you know what that means, son? Yeah. I code switched. He believed it. He's built. He's gorgeous. But I had to teach him. asks for support, not rescuing, of course, counters, disputes old thinking, takes responsibilities and articulates a sense of belonging and inclusion. Like, let your child tell them what they need, how you can love them, not how you think you can love them, but how they need you. And if they say just stand back, then do that. Don't let them fall, but stand back. Takes responsibility in being part of the problem and the solution, of course. That secret identity. This one is the best one, I think, and it's a tricky one. That secret identity is one where you say, you know what? Let me tell you some of my fears. Maybe I've never told you before. Being able to show your respect for them. Tell them that you trust them, that you have trust in them. Even share with them some of the things that you did when you were their age. And they're like, what? Oh, yeah, some of the similarities and differences. And then lastly, motivate them and inspire them. See, when you motivate them, you just tell them what they need to do, what they can do, all of this stuff, but you don't connect the dots. And so they have to figure it out on their own. But when you inspire them, you prove it to them by you doing it too. By you taking them. When I told my son he could be an astronaut and he can go to Air Force Academy, guess what I did? I took him to the Air Force Academy. I took him to in Huntsville so that he could go to the space academy, where they did the space and the launching and all that. I had to prove it to. It took me 2 years to get him there, saving my pennies, but I did it. I hope that these things help you. Years ago, I did my story and I had a picture of me running down the 16th Street Mall with a cap and gown on, and I'm passing the baton of education to my son. And when Christian, I don't know his last name, but that's him and his mom. And he sent this to me when he graduated this year from here. And him and his mom never forgot it, but he said, because when my mom saw that, she was determined and she started doing this, and this. And now I know it's possible and I did it too. And now he's in Los Angeles and I said, and I will be there. And I'm flying out to see him. So that's how it's done. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk with you. And I hope that there's a small nugget. There's a lot of things I said that you know. But when you put it all together, it's like, makes you think. Thank you again.